I guess a good point to start is an introduction. So could you please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background?
Well, my name is Terrill Frantz, of course, and I'm a professor at Harrisburg University, which is in central Pennsylvania. We're about 4 hours drive due west of New York City in the United States. My background primarily is from the computer science perspective. Ever since I was 14, I've been programming computers, so I'm mostly on the software side. And I've lived in Asia, in particular China. I was 15 years in China, so and I've taught in Europe at university level as well as in China and the United States. So I have a global view on things, and I try not to be, U.S. centric, which is difficult for a native U.S. citizen. So, but I returned from China about 3 years ago and landed in the United States back home, and I started with cybersecurity, as that was a hot spot activity-wise in the United States 3 years ago. But then Shor's algorithm found me somewhere along the line. And since that moment, I haven't looked back, and I've completely gone down the rabbit hole of quantum computing and everything quantum. I find it extremely stimulating. Programming computers for 45 plus years, it does get kind of redundant, even though it's a fast changing field with languages coming and going, etc. I'm just amazed by the challenge of getting to know physics for the first time in my life, really doing some much more sophisticated mathematics than I'm accustomed to, and most importantly, completely rethinking how I solve problems, with the new quantum way of viewing the world computationally with probabilistic computing and so on. It's just extremely refreshing to look at problems and possible solutions from a completely different perspective. So I've been doing that for the past 3 years, and here at Harrisburg University, I'm trying to take a small unknown university and try to give it a larger footprint than it is physically in the quantum space. And I looked at many aspects of quantum, things that needed to be done in our ecosystem, and I landed on workforce development as something that I found, talking to others, was really the number 3 problem that needs to be addressed according to others. First being error correction, second being the need for algorithms, and the third being workforce development. And I looked at that problem there, and it looked like something that I and we here at Harrisburg could do something about to move the needle in whatever way we can. So that's how we got involved in workforce development, and we're just doing our best at that. And that's where we are today.
Yeah, so maybe can you talk a little bit more about quantum workforce development? I think I understand how you started, but what's, let's say, the main vision and what's your goal with this activity?
Well, the goal is to develop a workforce globally, and I go back to I try to take a global perspective on everything, but really get this knowledge out into the workforce, so that should machines become available, and should they become truly usable, the people, the businesses, programmers, algorithm developers, circuit designers, etc., have the knowledge they need, when the hardware really comes to some critical mass. So, in short, it's really just spreading the news about quantum, but also trying to get people to think like a quantum circuit designer needs to think, which is completely different than in classical computing.
Yeah, and I might be mistaken, but I think your activity with quantum workforce development has three parts. Maybe I think it's events, master degrees, and jobs. So could you talk, let's say, a little bit about each part and what are the main goals here?
Well, those three parts, what I'm doing is actually I have a chain of things I'm working on, and they're all in various stages of production, if you will, or development. But the ones that are public right now are, first of all, I run a site called Quantumapalooza, which is a site that maintains a evergreen, as evergreen as I can make it, listing of quantum events going on globally that are free and open to everyone. And it's a one-stop place to go if you have a spare hour, a spare 2 hours on some afternoon or some night or morning. You can go to Quantumapalooza and see what activity is going on, anything that's quantum related. And sometimes that touches into a little bit of pure physics and things like that. But it's one of those initiatives that came up from a personal need. I discovered at the very beginning of COVID, there were so many activities going on, and I needed to keep track of them. So I figured, okay, well, I'll just open up my information to others to use. And I find that model of doing what you need for yourself, and instead of just keeping all of that private, opening up and making that information, data and information available to others is a tremendous service to our ecosystem, to individuals and organizations. But to why not? Why not make it public? And it is a challenge. There are on average 3.6 events every day of the week globally somewhere. And so what that means is 3.6 times per day, I add data to the site. That's not that bad of a deal. It's also helpful to me because it kind of forces me to stay on top of the activity going on in the ecosystem. It's important to pay attention to things that are important to you. And unless you have that requirement to stay on top of the activities by maintaining a Quantumapalooza site, you really kind of shortchange yourself. So anyway, the first thing is the Quantumapalooza site, which I'm quite proud of. It's one of those things that I find I get emails and people bring it up once in a while. I find it very rewarding, actually. But it's all about me. I'm just trying to keep track of activities so that when I get an hour, I can go visit an event in Amsterdam or Russia or the United States or Japan.
And actually, what type of events we are talking about? Could you maybe give one example so we better understand what events we are talking about? Do you need a register for these events? Who is making these events and how to talk to these people?
So what it is, it's just a consolidation of references to the events going on. So all of these events, and I think there's some 85 of them on the present schedule going forward, are run by other folks, other people. Yeah. London Quantum, Delft has events periodically, EU events, US events. So I and sometimes even get some events in Russia. So I post them. I just put links to those registration sites or information sites. Many universities have some really good talks, that are generally only known by the academic community. And by putting a link on Quantumapalooza, it opens up those interesting talks to others. But the requirement is that the event needs to be free. Mm-hmm. Once in a while, I'll put something in there that may have a nominal charge. Canada, up in Waterloo, they had an event that had a $5 charge, and I thought, okay, I'll put that on. But you know, anything quantum related, and that's a really broad definition.
And what type of subjects are discussed on this? Yeah.
Oh, anything. It depends on what people are producing. And I haven't done any analysis on the data yet, but it's, you know, profoundly introduction to quantum computing is quite popular. But it runs the gamut. I have a rating scale of 000 to 500, and that can give you the technical difficulty of the topic. But, you know, over the past year, machine learning is probably the most common type of event. If I had to narrow it down, other than, you know, types of events under the term of other is probably the largest because it's all over the place. But machine learning is a quite popular topic, quantum machine learning, that is.
Yeah.
But it's a very wide range from absolute beginner to business oriented to standards initiatives in Europe to, you know, highly deeply technical topics. I'm just reporting that they are going on.
And this is more like a lecture style or like a discussion style?
Whatever the producer is doing. You know, some events are you know, just panels. Some of them are lectures. Some of them are discussions. You know, there's a group down in Africa. The continent of Africa has a event it'd be, you know, every Wednesday afternoon Europe time, and that's, you know, a very informal event. But then, you know, occasionally the U.S. government has big, large, you know, 1,000 attendee events. So it runs the gamut. The criteria again is that it's somewhat quantum related and you know, free to the public, and it's live. Yeah. So where I draw the line are, you know, podcasts that get created and uploaded later. It's all live events.
Yeah. Nice.
But you asked about a second thing. You mentioned a second thing as well, the master's program.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, master program.
And this is another initiative that came up from listening to the ecosystem. In particular, the subcontinent of India has quite a few quantum events, and I participate in as many of these events as I can to get to understand and learn what the people are talking about in this ecosystem. From the, you know, the 40-year professionals to the high school students just entering in the ecosystem. And what was coming up was a lot of interest of where can I get a degree in quantum. At the same time, on the supply side, in talking to other professors around the world, you know, many universities were talking about putting programs together. So in my experience, I put a program together here. That was one of the first things I did when I saw this quantum activity going on. I developed a master's degree program here. And whenever you develop a program in a university, the first thing you need to do, or even before you develop a program, is really do an analysis of what the competition is like. And I don't like using the word competition. We're not in that position yet in quantum. But I needed to put together, you know, when I met with our president here at the university about this project, I needed to tell him, okay, well, there's 23 master's degree programs. At the time, there were just 15 in the world. So that was part of my pitch to the university. We would be an early mover in this space, and so on and so on. So anyway, I needed to put this information together for myself and said, hey, you know, I just flip a few buttons and that data is public. So there's a need out there for information about master's programs, both from the prospective student's perspective and from the faculty's perspective and university perspective. They need to know this stuff for competitive analysis and such. So I put all of that on a website now, and last October 2020, I had a series of, I think it was 14 events where I hosted the directors from the various programs around the world, and hosted them in a live event, and I recorded that and made those recordings available. And the idea was that each of the program would take 15 to 20 minutes to verbally and visually talk about their program for prospective students. So all of that information is persisted and stored on a website. It's in YouTube, etc. And it's really a go-to place if you're interested in master's degrees. You know, what's out there at the master's degree level, all throughout Europe, Australia, the United States.
And when we're talking about, let's say, master programs in quantum, how you identify if the program is really belongs to quantum field, or let's say some just normal physics or mathematics, computer science, whatever?
Well, that's a good question. So when I do things like this, I define quantum very loosely and very generously. A master's degree in applied physics, I would include it in my list, thinking that you know, I'd rather have a list that's too big than too small. And I let the visitor decide whether applied physics, a master's in applied physics, is quantum or not. If you look underneath the cover, you know, if you look at a program like that, there are a few of them that I have listed that are applied physics. You know, they do include quantum courses, of course. So so I'm very loose on that. Certainly, if the program has the word quantum in the program name, it will absolutely be listed. But you know, I keep it broad and let the consumer of the information narrow it down. Another example is there are several master's degrees in optics, and you know, so I included it in the list. Currently, I think there are 32, anywhere from 32 to 36. Again, that definition is kind of gray. Programs, yeah. And that's changing. That's growing. I estimate this time next year there'll probably be another 7 or 8 more programs publicly available.
And you say that you talk to leaders of these programs at university. So could you maybe summarize what's the main idea, what people think about these quantum programs?
Well, you know, of course, I'm talking to program directors of quantum programs. So, you know, they're all in on the quantum story. Let me put it this way. I mean, most of the programs are very new. Within 2 or 3 years of being formed. The oldest is in Spain, actually, and they've been around for I think 12 years now. It's 2021, 12, maybe even 13 years now. The University of Basque Country actually has the oldest program that I know of. So most of the programs now, again, are very young, very new. Most of the programs come out of the physics department, and so there'll be a bias towards the physics aspects of it. Most of the programs as well are oriented to engineering, and rightly so, quantum engineering, because you know that's where we are in the development of quantum computing. You know, the stage of development for the industry as a whole, where there's an emphasis on engineering at this stage. There are really none yet, and I say yet, that are purely on the compute side. Something like you would think of a computer science degree and what have you. We're not there yet. That's what I'm really positioning Harrisburg to be in the coming years, is really more towards the computer science / algorithm development side. But you know, there are large programs. Some programs have 100 students already, and there are small programs. Some programs have 2 or 3 students at this point. But I'm convinced, because of the variety no two programs are even close to one another. The variety gives the student a lot of choices, and it also leaves a lot of room for other universities to develop programs that fit their needs. Most of the programs, by the way, are from the ground up, meaning a professor in the university has an idea. He or she gets together with a few other professors and kind of bubbles up the idea to the administration. There's one or two, and that's starting to change, where it's administration down, which has a lot of nuances into how the program develops. Anyway, so the important thing, just like Quantumapalooza, is that the list and the data is current. I'm constantly on the lookout, constantly asking people about programs that they know of that I may not yet have on the list. You know, I do a lot of searching and look out for new programs. About 2 months ago, I added 3, all of a sudden popped up. So that's the important thing. Data can oftentimes get old because it's not maintained. And if it's to be information, it needs to be maintained regularly. So I'm on constant lookout for new information about new programs. In fact, I just added one yesterday that is actually a joint program. Actually, come to think of it, it's at Delft. Delft has a joint program that with another university on optics that I just discovered yesterday.
Yeah,
So
actually,
I try to keep it current is the key.
Yeah, actually, when I'm thinking about, let's say, programs in quantum, I start thinking about, let's say, groups or research groups which are working in quantum field, and I guess maybe there is usually some connection between research group working in the university, working in the quantum field, and relation to the quantum programs. I'm not sure if it's one-to-one correspondence, but I would expect that if the research group is working in the quantum field, then probably there is some at least courses in this university related to quantum field, you know.
Yes, it's many to one. Yes, many researchers to one program. But yeah, I'm talking about where you can get a degree or a major in quantum. There are endless number of universities doing research in this space, and I chose not to investigate that simply because, you know, that the industry already knows where those pockets are. And everybody has courses. I use everybody as incorrectly, but you know, lots of universities have individual courses. So that would be a list of literally hundreds of universities. But when it comes to actual degrees, that's something a bit more manageable, from a operational perspective. And it's a much harder question, actually. You know, if something is everywhere, then it's an easy question to answer.
Yeah. And do you think that this is sort of a connection of developing, obtaining a degree in quantum field, and then it will be like, let's say, a workforce for the quantum industry? That's sort of the idea, right? So you can get a degree, let's say, in the quantum arena, and then you can go to quantum industry. That's the plan, kind of?
Well, everybody has their own plan.
Yeah.
And there are some folks, and I kind of buy into it a little bit, is argue that really maybe you should not be thinking about a degree in quantum. To keep it simple, think of it as having a degree in graphical processing units, GPUs, right? Does that really make sense? It's a very small, important area, but having a degree in electrical engineering would probably be more effective than something as small, as narrow as a degree in a graphical processing unit. So many argue that a degree is not advisable, but you do want to become quantum enabled or quantum aware and quantum enabled as a professional, and focus your time in energy in the problem space itself. So have a degree in chemistry and being quantum enabled would be more valuable than being an expert in quantum algorithms and knowing nothing about chemistry, for example. And many universities choose not to have a degree for basically what I'm saying. They want to have a strength in quantum, but it doesn't warrant a degree. And so here at Harrisburg, it's pretty much the same thing. I'm trying to develop our program so that the biologists, can take a few courses to understand the quantum way of thinking, and the chemistry folks, etc. That is, some argue, a much more productive educational path, to the end that people have in mind. So that's a personal preference.
Yeah.
Many people want to bulk up their CVs or their resume, and this is one way of doing it. Many people have, I've got 2 master's degrees, so there's lots of different use cases out there for these programs or not.
Yeah, actually, now I have a question maybe about the courses themselves, because let's say I assume that quantum mechanics, they require some knowledge in math, right? So you have to know at least something, because physics sometimes rely on quite complicated math. So now when you're talking about these courses, and let's say people who coming from biology background or chemistry background, their math might not be so, let's say, profound. So do you think it's still suitable to attend these courses?
I smile as you describe that, Sergey, because as I mentioned before, what I'm doing is what I try to do at the macro level is look for holes, if you will, in the workforce ecosystem. And that's one of the biggest challenges that program directors have, is when they have students coming into their master's level program. Let's call it, the students have a valuable undergraduate degree, but it's in one of the fields, but only one of the fields that are necessary for really getting good at quantum. Meaning, and I call it the 3-legged stool, and there's probably more legs than 3, but I'll keep it simple, right? You really need the math, you really need physics at this point, at this stage, and you really need to understand some computer science things, computer science complexity at a minimum, so at least you can talk to people about NP and all that. So inevitably, every master's degree student will have a deficiency in at least one of those areas, right? You come through as a physics major, or you come through as a computer science major, etc. So that's actually a new program that I'm building right now, and actually start to roll out in around 4 weeks from now. That will be focused on those those individuals who want to join or enter a master's degree program. And the idea is to bring those individuals up to speed in those areas where they have weaknesses. So for example, if you were a physics major, you would pay most attention to perhaps the computer science segment of this program. We call it the name is still getting worked out, but think of it as really a master's degree incubator program that I'm putting together, that will bring, fill those gaps for those incoming master's students. But because right now, when you enter a program, every student will be by definition behind, right? So the idea is to bring the new master's students up to speed on these areas where they have deficiencies. It's not that they're not smart enough, it's just they haven't spent those 4 or 5 years attending to the computer science part of it. So hopefully then when they come into their master's program, they won't be blindsided with all these new ideas. So yeah, it's funny you bring that up.
Yeah, and maybe
it is a problem. It is a problem.
Yeah, let's now maybe move to the third part of quantum workforce development, which is jobs. Could you talk a little bit about what you're doing here?
It's all about jobs, isn't it? That's what it's about, at the individual level and at the industry level. Got to get that workforce trained up. Well, when you look at a workforce, you have, I'm trained in business as well. So I look at it from a supply and demand equation, and the supply side, which is putting together master's program, et cetera. But part of that equation is the demand side. And so about a year ago, I started developing methods and techniques and operational and software to start to develop a database, again, a current database that is evergreen, that is a listing of jobs around the world that have to do with quantum. And over the past 3 months, I've started really working towards getting that data out to the public, or certain parts of the public, so that people can take advantage of that. So over the past year, I've been providing this list to the Oak Ridge National Labs quantum newsletter, which comes out every Sunday morning, US time. And I list out all the jobs that we know of globally that have to do with quantum. Again, what is quantum? I go wide and let the audience narrow down that list. So that is starting to get rolled out now. I'm figuring out other ways to get that information, that data and information out to a broader public, and you'll be seeing things coming from us here at Harrisburg over the coming weeks and months. I've been releasing the information piecemeal at this point. The QEDC in the United States gets a listing. They get an update twice per day of jobs, and it is that fluid. Currently, there are like some 800 jobs globally.
Yeah, 800 jobs.
800 jobs globally, and I can point you to the job listing, job description, who's hiring it, where it's located, et cetera, which is a surprising number. It really is surprising. There are companies out there that have 30, 40 jobs available in quantum, with, where 25 of those jobs, let's say, have the word quantum in the title, to give you an idea. There are some companies, small companies, that might hire be looking for an office manager. I would consider that a quantum job if it's from a startup, for example, in quantum. But there are a lot more jobs out there than people realize. There really are.
Indeed. And do you see some trends when you look at these 800 jobs? Do you see some geographics, what type of requirements? So could you say a bit about these trends?
Well, I'm building the NLP processes and all that to really classify these jobs, and pull out, more complete and more interesting information. But it's really hard to say at the moment. It's the usual suspects, if you will. The IBMs, IBM has some 25, 30 jobs. Honeywell is hiring a tremendous amount of people. Amazon, and I don't want to go through a list because there's many with 10, 15 jobs. There are many companies out there. I don't see many in Australia, which is I don't know if that's really surprising. There aren't that many companies in Australia, but I think Australia should be a little more active than it is, in my opinion. But maybe it's just not there yet. Europe, I do look at, I've gone from just looking at English job postings to Germany. So I see German quite a bit. And France actually has more jobs than I expected. But you have to watch over the coming weeks or months or so for that information to come out. I'm not good at it, at just talking about it off the top of my head, but there are, you know, and in those 800 some odd jobs, I am including academic positions as well. And internships and all that, because again, I want to look at it from the macro, the entire ecosystem level, and then watch those trends over time. One of the interesting things that I believe we can glean from this, and what I'm particularly interested in, are the jobs from non-quantum companies. So Porsche had a job listing come up a week ago. 2 weeks ago. And so those companies that are on the user end of quantum, those are the ones, there may not be much there is not much activity yet, but I'll be watching for those over the coming years, because I think those are the ones I think that will really be the big tell. If you look at it from a macro perspective, the big tell that quantum's catching on. You would expect Amazon and Honeywell, et cetera, to be hiring people. That's not a surprise, but a surprise is when, you know, Nabisco or, you know, a non-technology company starts to hire quantum people. That's when I'm going to really get excited.
Yeah, indeed. And maybe I have another question about under the umbrella of quantum workforce development, do you have other projects? Because I found somewhere in the social media that you're planning to do some videos and national agendas somehow. Can you comment on that?
My goodness, Sergey, you're good. Yeah, actually, that's another project. I'm just in its infancy. Like I said, I have a global view, and I actually teach a course on China in Denmark every summer. So taking, you know, some of those things I do day to day anyway, and start to look at it with the quantum perspective, you know, I'm starting to figure out how to collect data and provide information on the national level, meaning, you know, the investment in the United States relative to the investment in from the government in France or Amsterdam, et cetera. I grew up a few decades ago. I'm still growing up now, but a few decades ago, when the United States and the Soviet Union were in competition for the race to the moon, get a human on the moon. And what that really was, that was not a race to the moon. There were a lot of other reasons for that project. And I firmly believe that that will be the case going forward in the coming decades, that quantum will be a national initiative of major significance going forward. So now's the time to start to, you know, get your ducks in a row, get your operational spreadsheets put together to be able to track that and report on that, because I think that will be you know, an area to watch, and that helps drive workforce and development of the quantum industry. You know, it was interesting, you know, newly elected President Biden 2 or 3 weeks ago had his first press conference, his first public press conference, and he mentioned in his 20-minute, I think it was 20 minutes long, maybe 25, he mentioned quantum twice. Twice. And, you know, the 5-year plan in China, quantum is mentioned. And, you know, so that's an area that is a leading indicator of, you know, development in the quantum space. And I think it'll be just interesting to just, you know, watch that scorecard, if you will. So I'm working, you know, some of that information is hard to get. China is a very difficult place to get reliable information from. So, you know, these things take months, if not years, to develop. So that's another one. Another area that I'm just starting to get my head around is the standards initiatives in quantum. So again, I'm working with various groups in ITSE and so on, in Europe, in the United States, and Asia, and China, on quantum standards initiatives. And so
I don't think that I get the quantum standards. What do you mean by quantum standards?
Well, just like the internet today has technical standards, defining what TLS 1.0 is and so on. And so it's early days for quantum. There are no standards because everybody's just figuring this out. But you need to start years in advance to develop the organizations and the relationships and so on, so that when the time comes and we are at some place where we can develop technical standards, the mechanisms are in place. So what's happening around the world, much like the events, there are discussions going on in IEEE, ETSI, NIST, etc., Japan on various standards in quantum, and there's various groups all over the world. And what I hope to do is start to bring that information together into a evergreen resource, because there's a lot of redundancy at this stage of the game. So I work on the standards committee with ISO on quantum computing terminology. Well, IEEE has a document. The Department of Defense just came out with a document on terminology, et cetera, U.S. Department of Defense. And so there's these groups all over the place, much like the events. And, the idea is to bring them together so that if you want to do some standards work, in quantum, you want to put together an initiative or whatever, you can easily go to a location to find, what's going on, who the players are, when do they meet, and things like that. So, that's another one of the initiatives that I'm starting to build capacity towards. And over the past 9 months, there's been a surge in standards conversations going on with the various groups.
Yeah, I see. And I guess for the sake of time, it will be my last question. And I think my last question will be from the different subject. I developed a habit of asking this from my guest. And the question is about, let's say, over-the-top news about quantum world in social media. And do you read this news? How are you dealing this news? What's your filter for the news about quantum arena?
Well, that's one luxury as being a professor. I can spend a lot of time on collecting data and information, and I don't sit here and record everything, but well, since this is a quantum audience, I have sensors all over the place. And it is a significant amount of my day is sensing what's going on all over the place. You wouldn't believe the numbers, if I could count them. So it's important to know what's going on. What I find in the industry, because, let's just take the geographic example. Europeans, because of time zones, view the world differently than the Americans. And it's not philosophy, it's just the time zone factor. So there'll be things going on in Europe that the Americans don't know, as an example, and think don't exist. And ditto with activity in Asia and India. There's a tremendous amount of quantum activity in India, and most of the people in the world don't know that. So, I build these sensors, if you will, get on mailing lists, and, I listen to other people. I don't see everything myself, but I talk to people all the time, ask them, hey, what's happening in your neck of the woods? Whether that's geographic or, in devices or quantum, sensors and stuff like that. So that's a full-time job, because there's a lot of activity going on, but it's important to know what others are doing, so that A, you don't duplicate them, and B, you can partner and learn from each other. Nobody anywhere has all the answers.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think it's quite a positive moment to finish. I guess I thank you for your time and efforts, and I wish you luck with developing the quantum workforce. I think I'm happy to see everything quantum bringing up, and I really wish you luck with that.
well, thank you, Sergey, and thank you very much for your initiative, because you're taking the time out of your day and your work to put together these programs, for all of us in the ecosystem. So thank you for taking all the time to do this, and I hope to see you again sometime somewhere soon in the quantum space.